What's good, people? Agent Juice reporting for duty. In this lovely video, I'm going to be covering the next step in developing Meanie and Happyland, which is world building. Now, this video is gonna kind of piggyback off of some of the points I covered in the plot versus story video. The TLDR of this whole thing is going to be that world building is only as valuable as its context within the story and characters that you have created, and of course plot. Now, before getting into the nitty-gritty of it, I would like to kind of tell you about today's speedpaint. This is a concept piece of the universe that Adon hails from. You know, the Meanie land. Now, Adon hails from the cruel and violent universe of Gremmdahk. And yes, it is supposed to sound like grimdark, because Gremmdahk is grimdark. And, you know, it's a joke because I'm a clown and it's funny. I'm a funny guy. Yeah. Anyway, the picture of itself is not of anything really important. It's basically just, you know, Adon fighting a giant monster. It's more that the picture is supposed to portray the spirit of Gremmdahk as a universe. And Gremmdahk is grimdark to the point of ridiculousness. It's supposed to be facetiously horrid, you know, filled with bloodthirsty monsters and environmental hazards straight out of the depths of hell. It's basically based on shit you'd find in Warhammer 40k and all those other ultra-oppressive settings where everything is miserable all the time. You know, this is where Adon grew up, so it kind of perfectly describes the reason why he is the way he is. Gremmdahk is this universe that has so much wrong with it. It's this chaotic hellhole, primordial soup of chaos. And Adon's goal is to turn Gremmdahk from this chaotic hellscape into an empire of absolute law and order. He is here to tame this wild beast and make it bend to his will. There is one obstacle, however, that stands between him and Gremmdahk, and that is Shakura. And Shakura has her own personality and rich history, which I have to cover in a future video, but for now all you need to know is that she is the insane sovereign deity of Gremmdahk, who's perfectly content with keeping it a chaotic shithole, and Adon must kill her before he can reforge the universe in his own orderly image. So for many of you out there, especially those who are planning on making fantasy or sci-fi stories that involve a fictitious setting that you have to build from scratch, I'm willing to bet world building is probably one of the very first things you did. And on top of that, I'm actually willing to bet that you probably have mountains of notes of world building without a lick of story or plot. And you know what? That's okay. You know, it's good to really get the creative juices flowing when it comes to world building because it can get you excited to tell a story, and you want people to be excited, so you want to be excited, so you can make the world exciting. You know, that's the fun of it. That's the fun of fantasy. It's the place where you get to make up magic and have cool shit happen. People love that. That's why Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings and Star Wars are so bloody, you know, famous. That being said, there is a bit of an unfortunate truth to creating worlds. And I did touch on this a little bit, like I said in the previous video about, you know, plot versus story, but I want to delve into it a bit more. And that is the idea that very few people give a shit about your world building if there's no context to it. You can have, for example, this really cool idea of a space butterfly, okay, this giant space butterfly that has, like, you know, prismatic wings to sail on radiation and solar wind to cross the universe. And you may even have like a bunch of cool drawings about what this thing would look like. And you probably did a bunch of research into, like, you know, butterfly biology and the way that solar wind and radiation works in the universe to have this really juicy world building detail. But without an engaging story or plot or character or anything like that to interact with this butterfly, it's just another, oh yeah, that's kind of cool kind of detail, you know? It's just another cute little thing in your notebook. And I don't think you want that, because I sure as shit don't want that in my stuff. The idea is that the butterfly isn't what is ultimately cool. It is the interaction with the butterfly within the context of your character, plot, and story that is cool. You know, maybe your story is about this hardcore Captain Ahab dude who is hell-bent on killing this giant space butterfly. Or maybe you have one of those, you know, stories where you have a timid child who has a fear of bugs who runs into this giant space butterfly, and the butterfly is hurt or something, so the child has to help the butterfly and they become friends and you know, that kind of story. So maybe the butterfly is sympathetic. The idea is that world building as far as I'm concerned, is a tool that is only as cool as your story and plot make it out to be. Do you want this butterfly to be cute? Then, have your character fawn over it and pet its cute little fur. Do you want it to be a giant scary thing? Then, have the plot center around, hunting this thing down and killing it and having your characters fear it, because if they don't kill it, it'll eat the sun or something like that. Or even you may even do a thing where, like, you want to establish that giant space butterflies, despite looking majestic to us as normal people on normal planet Earth, is really cool. In this universe that you're making, maybe you want it to be like a not a big deal. So you do a story about a backwater hillbilly who's never been off his dinky planet going on a space a hero's journey. Maybe you do a hero's journey thing, and they're seeing all this shit for the first time, and they see a giant space butterfly, and they're going like, oh my god, it's a giant space butterfly. Can you believe this shit? And like one of the seasoned sailors just kind of leans over and goes, hey, you should see the big ones. Like one of those gags where it's, insinuating that if you're impressed by this, wait until you see the good shit, building that anticipation. But that anticipation is not going to exist unless you have the plot and character to derive context from. And that's where world building becomes something that is not just a cute little idea in your notebook, but actually becomes something actually juicy and engaging. So let me kind of delve into some of the world building for Meanie and Happyland to show you an example from my work. In Meanie and Happyland, there are gods. There are gods because since Adon is a demigod, he has to have divine lineage, and therefore there needs to be divine things to derive that lineage from. So in Meanie and Happyland, gods are designed to look like they're not organic creatures, but rather like living statues or automatons. Hence the reason why you'll notice that Adon has like metal hands. They're not gauntlets, they're his actual hands. He's basically part automaton because that's where his divine lineage comes from. The idea I'm trying to convey here is that mortals are these doughy meat creatures, whereas gods are these, hewn from stone, perfected creations. There's supposed to be that hard divide between mortal and divine. As a note, I kind of borrowed that visual design from Asura's Wrath, if any of you are familiar with that video game. Again, don't reinvent the wheel if you don't have to, because great writers steal, and it's only good if you steal from a bunch of sources instead of just ripping off one thing. So yeah, keep that in mind. So not only are gods like immensely powerful, but they're powerful because they have access, to their god magic that mortals cannot have access to. And because of that, gods basically, the best way I can describe it are gods are like admins in a computer program, where mortals are just nothing more than lowly NPCs. Gods can do shit like opening up the console commands to forge the world how they see fit. Now, demigods inherit this ability, but they cannot use it to its fullest extent innately. A full god from birth can use this admin privilege innately, but a demigod cannot. They start off as mortal. So Adon's whole shtick is that he's very much like a started from the bottom, built myself up from nothing to a god kind of character. That's supposed to be his appeal. This admin thing I'm talking about, one of the effects it has is that mortals are physically unable to defy the will of a god, because the god can just force them to obey through admin console commands. But Adon was able to amass his own army of mortals and fight against Shakura because he eventually developed enough power that he could combat Shakura's admin privilege and basically grant immunity to his army, so long as his army bent the knee to his admin powers. So that's how all of that stuff works. Anyway, all of that world building stuff, all of it's cute and all, but I'd wager that the average person would not give a shit. I give a shit, obviously. I spent a long time coming up with this. But how do I make the average person give a shit? And the best thing I can do is tie it into character and story, specifically Adon, and that quest I talked about of him building himself up from nothing. And then, of course, his quest for universal domination. And then everything else that happens when he's banished and he's stuck in Happyland and he's stripped of all of that god power and he has to figure out how to leave Happyland so he can go back on a conquest so he can kill Shakura, rule the universe, and be its iron-fisted ruler. The idea is that it's more important to the integrity of the work that you care about Adon as a person before you care about him as a demigod. If I can get you, the audience, interested in his, vengeful, hard-ass kind of personality, trying to learn how to be friendly in a completely different world, stripped of all of these abilities that he's developed over his long life, then maybe all of the extra detail, all of the world building shit about him being a god and how Gremmdahk is a separate universe and has all these little, itty bitty bits to it, maybe then you'll give a shit about that because you give a shit about him and the other characters. Because it's like, all these details are icing on a cake. And icing is delicious. You can do cool things with icing. You can, draw pretty pictures. You can make flowers. You can add a bunch of flavor. But you still need the cake to put the icing upon. Otherwise, you have like an icing shell, which is weird. That would be unfortunate, wouldn't it? Make the cake and then put the icing on it. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up today's video. If you liked seeing this speed paint of mine and listening to my musings, go ahead and bitch slap that like button. If you like listening to me go through this series about all the things I do to, create this cartoon that I'm trying to make, this chronicle I'm making, then go ahead and kick that subscribe button right in the face. And if you want to be notified about all the times that I post videos, then go ahead and just uppercut that bell right in the chin and knock that motherfucker out. And there will be no escape from me. And if you really want to have no escape from me, then you can check the links below. I always put in my social media links, so you can check those out. And of course, in addition to that, I also like to link any of the videos I might have mentioned or whatever sources I use or yada yada. And yeah, I hope you guys stick around. And until next time, deuces.